Hello, beautiful tribe of EntheoNation. I am so excited to bring you today a member of my beloved family on the playa, Camp Mystic. It is a camp of amazing change makers, transformational entrepreneurs. And today my guest, his name is Michael Costuros. And he is a tech startup founder, advisor, and executive leadership coach in San Francisco. For the past 6 years, he has organized discreet ayahuasca retreats in Peru for his executive clients. Over the years, he's developed an innovative preparation and integration method that more than doubles the results of ayahuasca alone. His new company, Entrepreneurial Awakening, is expanding the retreat program to include locations in Tulum and Costa Rica, as well as a 9-month mastermind program for entrepreneurial leaders in 2017. Welcome to EntheoNation, Michael.
Hey, thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get to know you better. So I'd love to ask you if you could share with us what your entrepreneurship journey was like and how you ended up being introduced to ayahuasca along the way.
Yeah, I always enjoy sharing this story, so thanks for the opportunity. I started a SaaS platform software company in 2004. And we did very well and grew very quickly. So it was under the typical stresses that come with a rapidly scaling startup in San Francisco. And at about 2007, I'd really hit a place of burnout. I was quite burnt out, stressed out. We hit a bunch of challenges, as we always do. And it was actually my wife who convinced me that it would be a great idea to go to Peru and do an ayahuasca retreat and refresh my mind and get a whole new perspective. Now, that didn't seem too left field for me because I'd grown up in a culture, including my parents' culture, that saw indigenous medicine traditions as respectful and a viable way of relating to spirit and resetting body and mind and heart. And so I'd since late teens, I'd been participating in indigenous entheogenic ceremonies. But it had been a good 20 years since I'd really been engaged. So it seemed crazy at the time. I was really afraid that I would go to Peru, kind of have this epiphany and just like text my CEO, I quit, and never go back.
I did that, by the way, so I totally get it.
That was my fear. I didn't do that, and I've never seen anybody do that either. None of my clients have ever done that. But it actually really, really did refresh me and gave me a new perspective, and I came back to my company fully engaged. And the term I came up with in retrospect was like detached engagement. It was fully engaged with the game of the startup and not emotionally attached or in a reactive, traumatized state relative to whatever was going on that week, which allowed me to enjoy the experience and contribute a lot more than before going to Peru.
And so what year was this that you had this first experience with ayahuasca?
2008.
2008.
Might have been 2000. Somewhere 2007, 2008. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then when did you start to bring other entrepreneurs down to Peru, and where exactly do you go in Peru?
Yeah. So one of the insights from ayahuasca is that what I enjoyed most about my company was mentoring and developing people, essentially coaching and aligning teams and working with the culture, the human ecosystem within the company. So I started to focus on that more and more as I came home, when I came back from Peru, and eventually found a time where it was fine for me to step out of the company and leave it in the hands of my co-founders. And that's when I began executive coaching around 2010. It wasn't long before I had a few executive coaching clients that I knew were going to Burning Man and doing psychedelics recreationally. And to back up a step, as an executive coach, my number one challenge is helping my clients overcome the subconscious blocks that live in their blind spots that are preventing them from just being their naturally expressed great self. We all have these, and in a context of a startup, you're fully exposed. Like, the investors are looking at you, your peers are looking at you, the customers are looking at you, your employees are looking at you. Everybody sees you. There's nowhere to hide as a founder in a company or a leadership executive on the founding team. So there's a lot of unique pressure to overcome your quirks and become your greatest self. And this is where I love to work, because most of us don't have enough pressure to be willing to face those deeper, darker parts of our psyche that are holding us back from being our most awesomest self. So confronted by those and using the Jedi tricks that come with executive coaching, I found it wasn't enough, or it was too slow. So with a few, I started experimenting. I'm like, well, we can keep chipping away at this, or you can come to Peru and do ayahuasca for a week and see Machu Picchu while you're at it. And I think that will accelerate our process by 8 months or more. And so a few said yes, and I started doing just one-on-one trips, taking them down to the Sacred Valley outside of Cusco to do ayahuasca for a week and then go to Machu Picchu, which is, by the way, a very convenient cover story for those in their lives who they're not willing to let talk about ayahuasca with. And it wasn't, I actually, it was the first time I did that while in the ayahuasca ceremony itself, it became really clear to me, or I was told in no uncertain terms, that I was supposed to bring down groups of innovators to clear out the garbage so that they can really stand up and become the most shining version of themselves. And that's what the world indeed needs, is more entrepreneurial leaders that are heart connected, ego healed, and out to have the greatest impact in the world they can. And the medicine showed me that that's what I was meant to be doing, which I said no. Like, no. And then she showed me how she could make it easy. And then so I said, maybe. And then after getting back and sleeping on it for a week, it became clear that was really the right thing to do. So in 2011, my wife and I put our San Francisco mission apartment, gave it up, and put everything in storage and moved to Peru, to the Sacred Valley, because I knew it was going to take probably 5 months or more to figure out all the details necessary to have a world-class retreat experience there. And it took indeed about 5 months to find the right shaman ayahuasquero and to find the right locations and to operate the tour operators and guides and all the stuff I wanted for the package. So since then, since 2012, early 2012, I've been bringing down groups once or twice a year, always to the Sacred Valley, always including Machu Picchu, to do deep work with the medicine. And the other key thing is that my retreats are really programs that include a retreat. So we start a month before we leave, both one-on-one coaching and group coaching, like mastermind style, all the way up to going to Peru. Then we're together for 10 days, 24/7. And then we work together for a month or more after returning from Peru to integrate the experience. So it's a whole ecosystem of interactions and relating that includes the ayahuasca in the middle.
So it sounds like it's a 3-month package, basically, that people are signing up for.
Basically, it's a 3-month package.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what is the typical investment level for this package?
The retreats in the year coming ahead are $11,100.
Okay, so that's for the entire 3 months.
Yeah, it's for the 3-month package. It includes the mastermind,
Okay.
All expenses going to Peru, the one-on-one coaching. I try and organize the package where the mastermind value of the relationships are worth the price alone, let alone Peru, let alone ayahuasca, let alone the coaching, let alone the integration work. So,
Yeah, I mean, this is different from a typical like ayahuasca dieta that you would sign up for and go to in like Iquitos or Pucallpa. This is, basically like how I see it is this is a business mastermind.
Yeah.
And the pricing of your, business mastermind is actually in line with a lot of the business masterminds that I see, but you also have an international trip, retreat package included in that. So, I think that's important for people to know. This is not an ayahuasca retreat that's for 10 days in the jungle. This is more than that. And, there's business, leadership training, and there's networking with other people that can help you grow your business. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
I've noticed that the press loves to lead with $10,000 ayahuasca.
No, but it's not that. That's the thing.
No, of course not. If someone wants to do ayahuasca in Peru for a weekend, I'll just tell them where to go, and they can go. I don't need them to
Right, and you probably don't want your average, ayahuasca seeker. You're working with executives, so it's that level. So I just want to highlight that so that people can be clear, and not just immediately react at the price tag.
Yeah, from the executive mastermind perspective, compared to what's out there, it's a bargain. There are plenty of masterminds at $22,000.
Oh my God! Yeah. $100,000 for a year. I've seen those, I'm not quite at that diamond level yet, but I can imagine if I grew my business to 7 figures and I wanted to connect with, Jeff Walker or somebody else like, Ali Brown, then I might, it might be a worthwhile investment if I knew that the people in my mastermind group were going to be able to support me and, be my joint venture partners. That would be worth the investment. My coach invested in one of those $100,000 level masterminds, and she made her money back. She's a 7-figure coach. It makes perfect sense when you're at that level.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm, this is really exciting to me because I remember how you and I got connected. I have also had that vision too, which is like, I want to bring entrepreneurs down to the Amazon to connect with the indigenous people. So I work mostly from, in the Brazilian Amazon, and I want to connect those change makers, those, CEOs of companies to the plant medicine, to the shamans, so that in that process, not only can they achieve their own breakthroughs, but then also achieve the breakthroughs in their, in their companies and in their entrepreneurial endeavors, and then to use that time frame that we're together to start brainstorming some of the solutions to the world's most pressing concerns. And I remember sharing that with somebody at Camp Mystic in 2015, and he basically listened to me. His jaw dropped open. Then he was like, "You need to come talk to Michael Costuros." And he grabbed me, pulled me across the dining room and says, "Okay, you tell Michael exactly what you told me."
Yeah, it's great. I love that you're working in the jungle. My clients are not interested in going to the jungle.
I know. It makes total sense.
Jungle is level 2.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
3-star hotels.
Yes, I saw the on your retreat homepage, like the hotels that you guys go to. I'm like, wow, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, total different story.
Yeah.
I love the level 2 in the jungle. Level 2 in Costa Rica.
Yeah, and I was also really excited to see in your last trip to Peru, 2 entrepreneurs that I know and love. First was Jesse Krieger, who has been a joint venture partner of mine, and I just love him. He's really great. He's like lifestyle entrepreneur, location independent, speaks Chinese. And then also, I remember connecting Henrik Zilmer with you too. And so he had reached out to me. He was like, "I want to have this experience." I'm like, I don't know, oh, the perfect person for you. So I'm glad that he also had a chance to go. And I'm curious because I see him quoted in these articles, and his quote is that you killed him. So I'm curious to know how you feel about that statement that your client saying that you, Michael Costuros, killed him.
Well, I don't know that Henrik said that. I know that the author of the article framed what we were talking about in that way. I thought it was hilarious. I think that article was from California Sunday Magazine, was really well written, really engaging and fun and accurate. And, the context is that he's talking about ego death. And one of the things that's pretty common, if you're lucky with ayahuasca, is that you die, or you believe you're going to die. You're actually just fine the whole time. But, and so the author of the reporter was picking up on Henrik talking about that he died. And actually it would have been Javier, the shaman, who killed him. I didn't hand him the ayahuasca.
Or Madre Ayahuasca having killed him, because they do call ayahuasca the vine of death.
It's true. One translation.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know, so like the intersection of entrepreneurship and ayahuasca. As a digital nomad, I've been seeing more and more entrepreneurs in my community wanting to experience ayahuasca as a bucket list item. And it's kind of interesting. So there's like this, forum thread in our community about like somebody's sharing about his first ayahuasca experience, and all these other people chimed in. They were like, oh, I agree with that, 5+ ceremonies. I agree with that, like 10+ ceremonies, like as their kind of like credentials. And so finally I chimed in. I was like, look, I've had well over 100 ceremonies. Like, let me tell you, like, break it down into like, what I know. So, it's kind of interesting. So on one hand, it's like, there's more interest in ayahuasca, in the entrepreneurial community. At the same time, what is an aspect of entrepreneurism is the competitive level. Like how many like badges or how much street cred can you that makes you qualified to speak about a certain topic. And so it's kind of interesting because there is this phenomena, there is this approach, but yet it can often be a little bit at odds with ayahuasca and how she works in general, and in the shamanic and spiritual context of working with the plant medicines. So I'd love to ask you what your observations are at the intersection of startups, entrepreneurs, and ayahuasca, and potentially this clash of paradigms, like the competitive acquisition oriented entrepreneurial mindset versus the spiritual ayahuasca shamanic mindset, which is very much like receive, like integrate, like listen to what the plant is telling you, listen to what the forest is telling you. It's not about competition. What are your observations?
That's a great question. Over the last 5 or 6 years working with a lot of startup entrepreneurs, they come for different reasons. Lately, there's more FOMO as a driver than I've ever seen. Frankly, I don't care why they come. The more FOMO, the better, whatever. Because as you know, it's all bets are off once you drink that cup. Like, it doesn't matter what you think you're going to get, why you were coming, if you're trying to impress your mom or your dad, whatever. Whatever crazy reason drove you to drink ayahuasca, doesn't matter. Once you drink it, then you're with the experience and the positive outcomes, assuming that the ceremony is legit and the medicine's good, will happen. I personally don't mention plant spirits. I don't mention the forest. I don't mention Madre anything. I'm totally secular in my approach. Let them have their own experience, and oftentimes they will experience the spirits, and then depending on how those spirits interact, oftentimes, especially in the beginning, it's just you see them and feel them, but there's no real interaction. And then other times there's like full-on interaction, and depending on where they are on the atheist to New Age scale, they have different questions about how to deal with that, how to integrate that experience. But I don't find any conflict. Whatever drives somebody to be willing to drink ayahuasca, once they drink it, the medicine sets them straight. So, again, as long as the setting, the medicine, the ayahuasquero, and the safety of the container is held, then the outcomes are usually extraordinary. Those are a lot of ifs, though.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, coming from, in my experience has predominantly been, with the indigenous tribes, with the elders, have deep plant knowledge and, who are like 80, 90, 100 years old, who don't leave
Yeah.
the forest. And so it seems, a very different approach to like completely divorce yourself from the, spiritual healing
There's
aspect.
not divorcing.
Oh, okay.
It's not divorcing. I leave my agenda at the door.
Okay.
I don't have an agenda for them. In the earlier days, I really did. I was really holding your approach. I work with indigenous. I'm shaman. I apprenticed with shamanic medicine. I was wanting people to want to know about shamanism and Andean shamanism, Amazonian shamanism. And when I was quite disappointed when I found out that they don't care. That's not why they're here. They're here to heal the shit that's preventing them from being super fucking awesome and fulfill this kind of Elon Musk vision that they have for changing the world. They're not here to find a new religion or a new community or a new culture or a new reason to a new identity. They're here to clear out the crap and stay on mission.
So do you ever have your clients, coming back to you saying, hey, so, maybe that person might have been completely secular to begin with. And so they come to you and, you don't, have that, you don't bring the, shamanic and cultural, piece to your experience. And do you ever have a scenario where you have a client that says, hey, I think I, brought a spirit back with me from Peru, or, I have a spirit that visits me now every night and I don't know what to do with it?
Never happened. It's never happened. And part of the reason why that doesn't happen, and a big reason why I choose to work in the Andes, is the Sacred Valley, for all intent and purposes, is very clean spiritually. There's no shamanic warfare going on. There's very little competition. And the mountain energy is flowing. The river is going through it, just moving the energy. There's just no stagnant energy there. Mm-hmm. You'd have to go out of your way to get into a context and then open yourself up for possession or to have a spirit attached to you in a way you wouldn't want. I also, I'm really, really clear about the ayahuasquero I choose to work with and why, and he operates the tightest, cleanest ship I've ever come across, both in his personal life. I mean, basically operates like a monk, and works with ayahuasca and San Pedro exclusively every week for years on end. Like, he's married to the medicine and this is his work. So he runs a really clean, tight ship, and there's just like nothing can get into his space. So when we're blasted open in his temple, it's the safest energetic space I've been in. So those are some of the reasons why I choose the Sacred Valley and why I believe that none of my clients have come back complaining of any hitchhikers. Mm-hmm. Them.
That's really good to know. So what about some of the other potential pitfalls that could happen? So, ayahuasca also has the potential to really bring up some deeply buried psychological traumas. So, and sometimes, the most balanced person might be surprised that all of a sudden this wound has been, brought to the surface, and then there's all this stuff that they're now processing coming up for them. How do you, what safeguards do you have to address these potential dangers?
Yeah, why in my programs is I see that as an opportunity, and because we're ready for it. So for a month beforehand, I'm doing one-on-one deep inquiry. I know their psycho-spiritual background. Mm-hmm. I know their great-grandparents' lives, their grandparents' lives. I'm thinking like a shaman. I'm thinking back, 3 generations to understand what baggage this person is bringing into the ceremony. So I feel I've never been surprised. Mm-hmm. let's say. And then I also weave the group very tightly. They're already friends through group video before we get to Peru. And then in Peru, we start with San Pedro so that it's an outdoor semi-social experience for the first day we're there, which bonds them really deeply. So the trust is really high. And then after each ayahuasca ceremony, we do the integration circle after. So they're all holding each other's experience, deep trust. Then they do one-on-one consultations with Javier and with me if necessary. So they're just so held in this therapeutic container, both by their peers and by the professionals on the trip. Then that just continues when they get home. We do group and one-on-one calls for a month or more. So, and if something really traumatic happens, I've got psychiatrists and MFT on my team that can handle pretty much anything from extreme psychotic breaks to just deep trauma being revealed. So there's a whole team ready to support any contingency, but we luckily haven't needed to pull on we haven't needed to call 911 yet.
That's good. That's a relief. Yeah. So what changes do you typically see in entrepreneurs after they have their ayahuasca experience? Yeah,
this is actually the most inspiring aspect of what I'm doing and why I keep choosing to do it. The impacts are just extraordinary and continue to unfold for weeks and months and years after. One of the things I love doing every year, I go back to the original group and the second group and the third group, some of them now 5 years back, and ask for a new testimonial. Because it's easy to get a testimonial from somebody a week after they got back from Peru. They're all, I went to Machu Picchu and did ayahuasca. That doesn't count for me. It's like a year later, what did you get out of this? And what are you still getting out of it? That's more interesting to me. What are you still getting out of it? And they're always able to answer. It's surprising. So generally speaking, on average, what I'm seeing is people have a big shift toward being more human-centric. So CEOs that saw employees as more as cogs in a machine that were replaceable, that you just work until they drop and then get a new one on one extreme, will come back and choose to put their attention on culture and cultivate and develop their people and see their people as their greatest asset. And that has a ripple effect through the whole culture and through to the customer and changes everything. So you can maybe say go from a Jeff Bezos Amazon.com culture to a Zappos culture. So I always see that happening. They also tend to resolve conflicts in their love life, both family and romantic, and get that in order in a way that makes them more secure and grounded. And overall, I'd say they're less ego-driven and more and significantly less reactive and more present, confident, clear, and proactive, even under highly stressful situations. And any one of those things in a startup context where there's a lot of money at stake is priceless. But all of them together is just like so. This is, I think, why the retreats until now, I've only filled them through word of mouth. I haven't done any press. This is the first year I'm talking publicly about this work. And over the next quarter, articles will reach more than 30 million unique viewers per month.
Wow, you're going to get super busy.
We'll see. You never know what's going to happen with press and articles, but we have books and Fast Company and Business Insider and yourself. So there's definitely stepping up and seeing what happens, stepping out.
Do you have any specific examples of maybe product breakthrough ideas or, breakthroughs that significantly generated, a wave of new income for your clients?
It's a good question. In a company context, like say a CEO, whether they had a new product breakthrough as a result later on, I'm not tracking that. But what is apparent and obvious in the group context is when two participants find a way to work together or make an introduction that then totally changes the game of the other person's business. So we have an example recently was one of the guys on the retreat really wanted to take his podcast to the next level. Another guy on the retreat had a deep personal connection with the person who could do that with them, and in a partnership, got them together. They pitched it, and it worked. They decided to do business together, and within 2 months, they more than tripled their revenue, and now they have 100,000 listeners to their podcast, and it's just radically transformed his business. So it's usually through because the depth of trust that's built among the group through this together, they're willing to make like the most sensitive introductions, like people that they really trust in their network, and would normally hesitate to introduce somebody to. They're willing to do that, and that tends to lead to really good things.
So where do you see this trend of entrepreneurs using ayahuasca going 2 to 3 years from now?
It's a good question. We're definitely seeing a huge spike in demand due to these articles. There's going to be more, so we're going to see an increase in demand for ayahuasca. We're not seeing an increase in educated seekers. And we're seeing a massive increase in what I would consider an unqualified ayahuasca facilitators, because they'll pack 25 people in at $250 a head and do 2 nights on a weekend with no preparation and no integration, and just spit you out the other side and walk away with 10 or 20 grand, whatever they make that weekend, with the best intentions. But in my opinion, even when that weekend goes really well, which it often does, and the participant thinks they had a peak ayahuasca experience, in reality, they probably got 60% or less of what is possible for them due to the set and setting and the way those ceremonies typically are held.
Can you give me an example of what you mean? So I'm not sure what you mean by an unprepared facilitator or a set and setting that's not really optimal.
So, there's a lot of debate within the ayahuasca community on what is a prepared facilitator, qualified facilitator. In my opinion, if they haven't apprenticed for at least 4 years with an Amazonian teacher, and their teacher isn't making the medicine and mailing it to them, and they don't still have a relationship with that teacher and go back at least a month, a year to work with that teacher, then they're not operating in a lineage, and they're kind of pioneering a new way of working with the medicine. So the majority of the ceremonies I see out there in the States are pioneering ceremonies where they did some work with a bunch of different teachers or one teacher, and then they decided they were ready to pour ayahuasca, not necessarily their teacher, medicine from Hawaii, and they start leading ceremonies in a way that is effective on many levels, and not nearly as deep as anything that would be held in a traditional shamanic lineage fashion. A term my friend Daniel Pinchbeck, I believe, coined to describe that type of ceremony is it's a community building and consciousness lifting ceremony, opposed to the type that I'm engaged with are like deep shamanic healing ceremonies with no more than 10 people in the ceremonies I work with, because the shaman works so much one-on-one, so deeply with each person. So there's we call them yoga-wasca ceremonies, and then the deep healing ayahuasca shamanic ceremonies. Of course, my neighbor's using a leaf blower right now, so hold on. Close the door. So, but that's stylistic, and I don't want to sound like an orthodox who doesn't like this new remix. The medicine needs to be remixed and sent around the world in ways that it will to meet different communities. What I want is the seeker to know that there are at least 4 different ways of ayahuasca ceremony is led, and there are 4 different lineages behind those ways, and each one has a different way and a different pro and a different con. And ayahuasqueros come in all colors, shapes, and sizes. And would you rather work with a part-time ayahuasquero who's only led 30 or 40 ceremonies, or would you rather work with a full-time one who's led 1,000 ceremonies? Because you can't. They're both out there. Mm-hmm. You just need to know how to ask and what to look for.
What are the 4 different ways of working with ayahuasca that you just referenced?
Well, you could say there's the Santo Daime tradition, which is a Judeo-Christian, heavily influenced tradition coming out of Brazil. And then you have the indigenous traditional way, where we typically would call the Peruvian, heavily influenced by the Shipibo, so like the Peruvian ceremony style.
The curanderismo style.
Yeah.
Vegetalista style.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then we have what's coming out of Colombia and Ecuador, the Yahe tradition, which is a different structure and way of drinking. And then we have the New Age remix, where anything goes, and there's guitars and multiple musicians and a lot of singing those are the more community building and consciousness raising ceremonies that can be deeply healing, but it's not like the open heart surgery that you would get under the leadership of an indigenous shaman who's only been doing it that way for decades.
Yeah, where you're going to get like the, soplata, and they're going to do some type of extraction on you. I feel like a lot of the Brazilian works are that I've experienced, even with the indigenous people, are much more community-based works, where it's like everyone's getting together to sing and to celebrate or to activate a shared prayer.
It's a beautiful community building tool when used that way. For the way I like to work with it, I'm not interested in that. I want to go down into the shadow to the deepest root core issue and transform that. The way I see it is, many people will only do ayahuasca once, and so you've got them one time. I've got them one time in Peru, and I want them to get 110% of what that medicine has to offer. And if they want to come back and do community building or go to church, they can do that. But like, if they're with me, it's like, we're changing your life, period. Once, one and done.
Great. So thank you so much for sharing with us your work with the Entrepreneur's Awakening program. I would love to wrap up this conversation by asking you one of my favorite questions, which is, what was your most far out visionary experience working with ayahuasca?
Okay. So oftentimes I'm assisting the ceremony, so I have a tiny dose. And one of the times I was assisting, and it was probably 3/4 of the way through, and I could hardly feel my tiny dose anymore. So for all intent and purposes, I was sober. And the room was quiet, so I was taking a break. And Javier, this ayahuasquero, was having a cigarette and relaxing. I'm a mapacho. And so I just kind of put my knees up like this. I was sitting on a bench in the ceremony room against the wall, and it's kind of like, I'm going to take a rest. I'm just doing this. And then I had my eyes closed, and I was sitting up, and I saw this fluorescent mechanical bug about this big come down, and I opened my eyes, and it was still there. I'm in the room, it's all dark, but I can see this thing come down, and I'm like, what the and it comes down, and it kind of starts to orient and look at me, and this like thing opened. It felt like a UFO at this point. It was like this bay opened, and this thing came out, and it scanned my heart, and then it showed these 2 dark spots, and then it cut them out and closed it up, and then my heart started glowing, and then it retracted its little instrument, closed the door, and then sort of like poof, took off like a UFO in a movie. And I was like going to look at Javier next to me, like, did you just see that? And of course he didn't, because that's why I didn't ask. But I think, it's one thing to see visions when you're totally with the medicine and you're like blasted into the DMT world. But to have that experience when I felt sober and hadn't even done a full-on journey experience, that's really stuck with me. It was really amazing.
Wow.
I'm a believer.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing. How can our listeners best stay in touch with you, Michael?
They visit entrepreneurawakening.com and join our mailing list.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, and you have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.